Great. Good evening, everybody, and I'm Jeff with Four Muddy Paws, and we are here with another one of our Destination Fresh Foods education talks. And we are really excited this evening to be talking with Billy Hoekman from Green Juju. We were hoping originally to have Kelley with us, but there are scheduling issues and that couldn't happen, but we are thrilled. And we are in great hands with Billy and so much knowledge that he brings to dog and cat nutrition and to now Green Juju. So we're very excited to have him with us. And we're, Destination Fresh Foods for us is really, every destination begins with a single step, as we say. And we want you to be able to bring fresh foods and put fresh foods into your dog and cat's bowl. It makes a big difference, the power of whole foods. And that's what Green Juju is all about. And that's where it comes from. So, without further ado, I'm going to welcome Billy to our talk tonight, and thank you for taking the time out to speak to everybody about nutrition and Green Juju in particular.
Absolutely, two of my favorite subjects. So I, obviously appreciate being here, and starting out, it is really the independent retailers that sell our products that are the lifeblood of how it's you that sells the product, and it's you who gets it out to the consumer, and it's where we can see all of those wonderful health outcomes. So I appreciate not only what you guys do, but just having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know Kelley's not here to tell her story, but I know that you know her story very well. So explain a little bit about how Green Juju got started, how it got started, and really the big is the why it got started. Because I think people like to hear the history and the story behind some of the products that we carry in the shop.
Yeah, I think, Kelley didn't mean to start a company. I think that's a very important point. I think, she didn't set out and say, well, there's a lot of money in the natural food business, so I'm going to try and, do this in the pet industry. It all starts out with her dog, Bailey, and it all starts out with, her loving her dog. And I think we can all relate to that. And her dog ended up having cancer, and she wanted to kind of treat Bailey holistically with some of the stuff she was doing with her own nutrition. And at the time she was doing some juicing and some things like that. And that's really where the Just Greens came from, and that's really how that came about, was her realizing that looking for a product and not being able to find something that wasn't pills or powders, and being able to make something at home. So she went about actually formulating what is now Just Greens, quickly realizing that, dogs need the fiber as well, so and that's something that's very unique about Green Juju is, we actually juice it and add the fiber back to it. So it kind of pre-processes it even further than just grinding it up. Mm-hmm. So it really came from the love of, her dog. And then from there, she had a dog walking business in Seattle, and her clients, wanted to know what was going on with what she was doing, and wanted to, start using some of these blends. And she started seeing all these really, positive health effects. And from there, from what I understand, she kind of, started to get into stores. I do like to tell people now, and sort of brag about being the first Green Juju customer. I think people have maybe heard this story a few times since I, started with Green Juju, but I was the first Green Juju customer. She was, previewing it for a store that was not supposed to sell it. It was the first batch there, and she happened to leave. I came into the store after. We didn't know each other, and the store accidentally sold it to me. So, my dog Lua was the first, dog to have it from a pet store, and I was the first customer, which I think maybe that was fate. Some 10 odd years later. What I love about the story is that it's not about. It was never about starting a company. It was just about, how do I help my own dog, and then once she saw the results, how do I help as many dogs as possible? And that's one of the reasons I signed on with Green Juju, was because I want to help as many dogs as possible too. And now with our treats, cats. So I'm not forgetting about cats. No. I could see all the cat people commenting right now.
Exactly. We love our cat. Yeah.
So, I think we had that in common. And so that's kind of where it started. And it started with the blends, and now we have, a full product line and some really neat things coming out in the next year. So
great. And you mentioned the whole foods, and you mentioned the extra fiber in just in Green Juju, but what's the power of whole foods? Like, why do we want to add that in to our dog's diet? Particularly like the Just Greens or the Bailey's blend. Like, why do we want to do that?
well, the power of whole foods is the sum of all of its parts. So if you eat kale, let's say, you're eating a whole food, but that whole food is made up of thousands of chemicals that, are going to interact with each other in different ways. And so the only way we can really surmise all of those health benefits is by eating them in their natural state, in my opinion. And I think a really great way to sort of illustrate that right off the bat, and one of like the real premises to Green Juju just generally, in my opinion, is the Purdue University study in 2005 that showed that dogs fed processed, kibble diets that had dark leafy greens added to their diets 3 times a week were 90% less likely to develop certain types of cancer. So there you go. That's a reason right there. I mean, if anyone knows that study and says like, well, it would be, and doesn't think it's a good idea, I think that's kind of crazy, because that shows you can add, and that's only 3 times a week. So that shows you can add a little bit of fresh. And by the way, with golden, or with the golden was kind of a slip there. That's kind of hilarious. With yellow and with yellow and orange vegetables, it was 70% less likely. So in terms of looking at that, that's one way where you can say, wow, Green Juju, specifically the blends, is an easy way to get a better sort of health outcome potentially. So we can't obviously guarantee and say, if you feed X, Y, and Z, this will not happen to your dog. But what we can do is do as many healthy things as possible to increase the probability that you won't have, diseases and disease conditions, and you'll have better health outcomes. And that's all we can really do. And that's why, you guys do what you do, is how can we get these animals to have better health outcomes? So that's just, for me, that's just straight numbers. And I think that ends the plant debate with dogs. And all of my answers are like 40 minutes long, so just bear with me here. I think people understand this at some point, but well, actually, you're lucky because I lost my train of thought. So we can, after I made the joke, I lost my train of thought.
So one of the things that I think that makes Green Juju unique is the mix of vegetables or mix of greens that you put in. Both formulas are similar yet different.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of have different aspects to them with different, your different greens that you put in. And also the fact that they have bone broth in them. One has bison bone broth and one has turkey bone broth. So maybe talk a little bit about the differences between, like, when you might want to use Just Greens, when you want to use Bailey's blend, or just use them in rotation.
Well, using them in rotation is obviously what we recommend just generally. There's different health benefits there. I think, if you look at, you can go through kind of like the gambit of those things, but if you look at, for instance, the Just Greens, that's going to be more alkaline, because that was when Kelley was developing that product, she was developing it for a dog with cancer. So wherein if you look at the Bailey's blend, for instance, and I think we're going to get into later with the fermentation piece,
right,
that starts at a lower pH because that's sort of like initiated, with the ingredients there. But some of the things that I love in, for instance, the Bailey's blend, well, actually my 2 favorite ingredients that I think are sort of like less talked about are the parsley and the cilantro, which is one or the other. And my favorite part about that is one of the reasons that we love, unless you're part of that weird like subgroup of people that can't eat cilantro because it's like tastes like it's like 14% or something.
Yeah.
Not to say that those people are weird, but it is a strange fact. one of the reasons they taste so good is because, and they smell so good, is because of the oils inside of them. Now, all of those oils are going to have different health benefits. And one of the really cool things about just herbs and spices in general, but in this case, herbs, is that they're going to have a much higher antioxidant content, particularly because of those. So those are two things that we don't talk about as much. But for instance, in the Bailey's blend, you have your broccoli, which is going to have those sulfur compounds, which are going to be anti-cancer. And what I love about it is it's such a broad range of plants in both of them that you can sort of break down and say, we're getting, and the other thing I really think is like brilliant about what Kelley did there is because it's a broad range of plants, but it's not the longest ingredient list, right? We want to have a good amount of those plants. We don't want to have, 100 ingredients that are like, every obscure healthy thing you can put into something. We just want whole food, and we just want to be able to, for the body to be able to sort of absorb those things. So I would recommend rotating between the two if you can, but even if your dog prefers one, or there's an allergy issue there or something, one is amazing as well.
Perfect. So I come from our dogs at our house love greens. They love all greens. So when I'm making a salad, I'm chopping it up for my salad, they're getting a cucumber, they're getting green peppers, yellow peppers, orange peppers. They do eat spinach, they'll eat everything. But not every dog loves greens. And even though these are, really finely chopped and in a tasty bone broth, just putting this on top of kibble, what if some dogs are just like, I can't do this? So how do we get more greens into our dogs? What are some other ways that we can do that and use Green Juju that way?
Well, we actually do hear a lot that dogs that won't eat, greens, like for instance, in the case of just chopping them up or something, that they enjoy the Green Juju a lot more. So I think that there's just probably a better probability. I think that has to do with the blend of them. So the blend is also is not only nutritional, but it's consistency as well. When you are actually doing like a formulation and doing that, but also the bone broth and the coconut oil are not only going to obviously help nutritionally. So, for the bone broth there, you have, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about bone broth at some point, but, so you have all the health benefits that we'll go over sort of the bone broth, but also obviously dogs are attracted to the flavor as well, and with coconut oil. But one of the unsung things with the coconut oil that I think is really cool is that both of these are going to be 3% net carbs. So they are both very low carbohydrate, which is obviously what dogs need in terms of, a low carb diet. But obviously if you're eating any foods, your blood sugar can kind of fluctuate. And fat actually helps to not fluctuate as much or fluctuate at a more healthy rate. So the coconut oil is something that I think is really cool. That's just a sort of side note there. I really think most dogs, if they're eating a processed diet, truly enjoy something like this being mixed up in it. Now you could try something like our bone broth or something like that, or just kind of like a mixture of our products. Obviously dogs that are on raw diets are not really going to have, too much trouble there. But the other thing, if your dog likes it frozen, you can, refreeze it. You can try sort of whatever works for your dog, but I think most are going to be into it.
Great. And we've mixed it sometimes with, you mix it with raw goat milk and freeze it. There's other ways that you can give it, give it that way. Make it as like a treat for your dogs. And sometimes they enjoy that as well. I've got a question from Beth, who is it better to let it thaw before feeding?
Yeah. It's obviously easier to serve too, but I would thaw it out before feeding and give it a good mix every time. And I forgot to I told you before we went on air, but I did want to tell the viewers here that I'm disheveled in the background because I'm moving tomorrow. So just side note, my house doesn't normally look like this. Just throwing that out there. But the other thing about feeding too, which I think is important to cover, is whole foods are great. And so here's a good example. When you're feeding, you're making your salad and you're chopping up your vegetables, you're not going like, well, you need to eat exactly 3 pieces of cucumber. You need to eat
Right.
2. So this is just whole foods. And if you think about it, an ounce of this is like, I believe 9 calories in just greens and 15 calories in Bailey's blend. Hopefully I'm right about that. But so you're not going to necessarily like overdo it. So you can just take your spoon and what Kelley calls plop it in the bowl. You know, a small plop, a medium plop, or a big plop for a big dog. And that's totally fine to do as well. So if you're a measurer like I am, that's great. But if you're not, there is nothing easier than adding something like this and getting, you know, better health benefits.
And I would say if someone's brand new to feeding fresh whole foods, and they're on a processed diet, just go slowly, like everything we do. Just use less is more in the beginning, see how they like it. And then, you know, and then take it from there. How long will it last once it's defrosted in the refrigerator? How long will it last in the refrigerator then?
So the greens is going to be 7 days, 5 to 7 days, I believe is what it says on the actual packaging there. And then obviously on the packaging for the Bailey's blend, it says the same thing, but we did make the recent discovery.
Right. So let's talk about that because it's pretty exciting. I think what you've discovered about this is Bailey's blend and why it works with Bailey's blend and doesn't work with my finger. I'm sorry, I'm not very bad.
Oh, no worries. How dare you?
But why it works with Bailey's blend and not just greens, and what's the power of Bailey's blend when you do this?
Yeah, so I'll tell the story. I don't think I've told this story exactly. I kind of went through it with Kelley, but you know, I've obviously been using Green Juju for many years in my own, you know, one of my favorite things in the world is was to feed my dog. Unfortunately, I lost my dog a few weeks ago, but
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But, you know, feeding my dog and formulating her food and doing that is one of my favorite things in the world. And I will add, she continues to be the inspiration for my career forever. So
she'll always be your inspiration.
Yes, absolutely. So but I was using it with her in the recent past, and it was in there about 10 days because I'm not someone who's very like squeamish with, you know, keeping things a little bit longer. If you know anything about, you know, some of my past work,
right?
And I was in there about 10 days, and I smelled it, and I was like, you know, this smells fermented. You know, having obviously a background and being able to, you know, to be able to do that, I was like, oh, interesting. So, as most people don't have, I pulled out, you know, my pH meter at home, and I looked at it, and I said,
"Of course you did, yeah."
I said, you know, this is I believe it was at like a 3.6 pH, and I was like, this is fermented. This is really. So let me think about this. So I turned it around and I said, oh, okay. The second ingredient is cabbage. Okay, cabbage is used in wild ferments, especially when people don't want to use salt because it's so rich in natural bacteria, right? And then I was like, oh, and it has lemon, which would actually bring the pH down. So what do you need when you do fermentation? You need something like an acid or salt to bring the pH level down. And then you need something that's rich in natural bacteria. And those pathogens, you know, have a very tough time growing in that low pH. So I pulled out, you know, a bunch of containers of Green Juju, and we started to just look at them over time in the refrigerator. And what we found was that after about 8 days, you get down to that 4 pH. So that's when you're really in actually, I believe that's the FDA's definition of fermentation, which I don't necessarily think that's the end all be all of fermentation. I think there's a lot of different words you could use to describe it. But in ours, that's a food safety point, right? 4 pH is where those pathogens are going to have a really hard time growing. And it got lower than that as well. So it basically, what I would recommend to people, because I think this is kind of cool because it's like rotation in one product. If you're a small dog and you buy the big Bailey's blend, you could then use it fresh for 8 days. And then after that, it would be good for another 2 weeks. So that's a total of 22 days. and it will just get healthier as it sits in the refrigerator because it's already at that 4 pH level in there. So for me, it was a really fun, nerdy discovery.
Right. So for those who might be new to the fermentation concept, we've heard about, people have heard about fermentation, but they don't understand why they should care about fermentation. So can you talk just briefly a little? I know you could talk.
Sure. Yeah.
But the short answer of like why we care about fermentation.
Yeah. So fermentation is been happening since, before people. So, it's very, it's the pre-processing of food, but that food, still being in a raw food state in this case. So it's basically all these good bacteria that are growing because of the process that I just described, pre-digesting the food. So now you have this amazing product that we've juiced. So we have the juice and the pulp, so it's further broken down to be easier digested. And now that product is being eaten by good bacteria. And those good bacteria are not only going to make it easier to digest, even easier to digest, they're going to make extra B vitamins, extra organic acids, and also they're going to fill up with good bacteria. So you're going to get more probiotic bacteria. And if we've learned anything, in the past 10 years, when it comes to science, you want as many different types of good bacteria as possible. So this is another great way, to be able to add into whatever else you're doing. So basically it takes something that's incredibly healthy and makes it healthier. And that's kind of what fermentation is in a nutshell.
That's perfect. Thank you. So we touched on bone broth, and that's another product that you carry. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, I don't have one tonight to share with you. I did it on a Facebook Live this morning and showed everybody, but you have bison bone broth. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about that bison bone broth, and then why that's so important, why bone broth is so important in the bison bone broth.
Yeah, well, first of all, the quality of that bone broth is absolutely incredible. So one of the reasons I signed on with Green Juju was because I was very comfortable with the whatchamacallit, the sourcing of the company. Obviously, that's a big deal for me, and I need to be,
the big deal for us too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, one of the reasons I live in, for instance, in my own personal life, one of the reasons I live in Pennsylvania and am moving to Lancaster tomorrow is because I appreciate farm to table food that's produced in a particular manner. And that bison is, in my opinion, the most ethically raised bison in the country. It's grass fed and finished when we get those bones. So you can feel good about that. But also just bone broth in general. One of the things that pets need is more moisture, but because water or moisture is the most important nutrient, obviously. And it's the delivery system of all other nutrients. So for me, for the 15 years I was feeding my own dog, I would do basically double the recommendation of bone broth every day because we want those nutrients that are sort of pulled out of those bones. So we want the collagen, we want the minerals, we want, all those other types of protein. We want all of those things suspended in that moisture state because they're going to be much easier assimilated into the body. And it's just such an easy way to do it. And also, let's not forget that dogs just really love it. So it's just like an awesome thing that, we don't, I get lost in nutrition, obviously. But I sort of forget sometimes, like, oh yeah, my dog really loves the flavor of this. It's just an enjoyable experience. So, and especially, yeah, I just think bone broth is one of the more important foods. And ours comes frozen, which is in its most natural state. And you'll notice it is jelly. It is gelatinous, so we can actually see that protein. And the really underrated thing of bone broth, because I think when people look at liquid foods, like if you were talking about milk or bone broth or whatever it might be, it's like people really hit on moisture. But bone broth has free amino acid protein, which is very important because those free amino acids are, incredible for being absorbed by the body and the kidney not really having to do any work because there's nothing to break down and there's no waste from that. So it's just while it's not people look at it and go, oh, there's only, typically about an ounce or two of protein per, or a gram or two of protein per ounce of bone broth, that doesn't tell the whole story. The consistency of protein matters, right? So for instance, I saw a show once when they said our breakfast cereal has as much protein as an egg. Well, that might be true, but that protein is vastly different. So the quality matters, right? And the amino acids matter. So I can't say enough good things about, that. And I will take this opportunity to do a little plug for something we're doing in the future here, which I think you'll be interested in as well. So mark your calendars if you're watching this from the 28th to the 1st. That's 4 nights in a row, September 28th to October 1st. We're going to be debuting 4 new products, and we're going to do a live. Me and Kelley are going to do a live each night, and we're going to tell you why we made it, why it's so good for your dog or cat, and why you should be excited about it. So that'll be over on our channel.
Okay, that's awesome. That's great. And just going back to bone broth for a second, I do want to talk about just the benefits for a senior dog or for the joint support that bone broth can offer.
Oh, absolutely. So again, you go back to that collagen, but you also go to that glucosamine, that chondroitin, that MSM. All of those things are going to work together in those cases. So it's not to say there aren't instances where a dog might need like a supplement, right?
Right.
On top of that. Yeah. But my thing is, let's try food first, and let's try all those things in their natural, ratio first. And so I'll give you my own dog as an example. It's a nice little anecdote. Lua from birth had a grade 3 luxating patella, and she also had back leg tremoring. And I fixed both of those essentially through nutrition. And that was mostly through bone broth, and a lot of bone broth consumed every day. And so she never had to have surgery for the luxating patella, and it never really bothered her. In fact, she was going for 2-mile walks a week before she passed. So in terms of her body was great. And so, and that's what I've seen, in many senior animals. And I would just highly recommend, if you do have a senior animal and you're feeding processed food and you're seeing all of the normal things that people see. I mean, the amount of people who come into your store probably and are like, oh, my dog's healthy, but, they get hot spots and they limp and they have, ear infections a few times a year. It's not normal, in my opinion. And so I would encourage people and say, hey, we want to meet you where you are. And I think we have products for everyone. Even those people that don't want to go into the freezer. That was another reason why I wanted to join Green Juju, was because, I want to help those people too. And
it's a big tent. Everyone's invited. I
mean, exactly. Let's meet people where they are and help everyone. That's the whole goal.
And our goal is to let pets live a long and healthy life and not have the hot spots and not have those issues. If we can do things now early when they're young, or even middle age, make those changes now so that we can they can live long and happy lives. Beth has a question. If there's bone broth in the Juju, would it be overdone giving more bone broth?
That's a great question. And actually, I'm really glad you asked that, because thank you, Beth, who I think follows me on Instagram. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm pretty sure. So thank you for that as well. But so one of the things first of all, no, you're not overdoing it. You can do the recommended dosage you could do the blend, you could do the recommended dosage of the bone broth, you could do all of those things, and you definitely wouldn't. In fact, you could double the bone broth and still do that, because it's a smaller amount. Because one of the things that makes our blend different than some of the other products on the market is the vegetables are really the star of it, right? We want all of the vegetation because it really is a whole green supplement. So the bone broth is there, and it does serve a nice purpose in terms of, obviously not only palatability, but nutrition wise, but it is a smaller amount. And you'll notice that on the ingredient panel, it's further down, and that's by design. So the short answer is no. You could do a lot more bone broth and be totally fine.
Sorry, I've got a puppy and another dog who decided to play.
I am so jealous of you right now, so you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
I'm hoping I applied to adopt a dog and I haven't heard back. So I'm hoping they pick me. So fingers crossed. I'm a good dog owner, I swear.
I was gonna say, I think you've got some references. I don't know. I'm just guessing. No, that's great. And so we've got, just the Green Juju frozen, the broth is amazing. But I think maybe what's kind of flying under the radar sometimes are your treats. At least not everybody makes the connection with these. And so talk about these treats, because I think the fact that they have, organ meat and vegetables and the other variety, and I mean, they're adored in our house as well. I've not met a dog who doesn't love the Green Juju treats. So talk to that a little bit if you can.
Yeah, I shouldn't say we, because I didn't develop those, but all the credit goes to Kelley on that. So I just think they're very innovative, not only in their sourcing. So again, if you look at the bison, and that's going to be, grass fed. If you're looking at the beef, it's the same way. We're getting our poultry from a very respectable, very reputable farm on the West Coast there, which you'd find, the same sourcing at like Whole Foods and that kind of thing. Again, going back to that. But my favorite thing is organ meat is, the unsung hero of just nutrition generally, be it for humans or it's a little harder to eat for humans. I don't know if there's a lot of people, cooking liver for dinner tonight, but
not as much anymore like we used to growing up. But yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, and I know there's debate about heart being an organ and et cetera, et cetera. Technically, it is an organ, but it feeds a little bit differently. But heart is, for instance, so much more nutrient dense than muscle meat. It has double the amount of collagen, for instance, than muscle meat does. So it has a higher mineral profile. So with those products, we're combining organ meat. So we're getting that heart and liver there with a specific antioxidant color. So you have beef red, bison green, salmon blue. And then we have our bison liver trainers. And so each color so one of the things that makes Green Juju so unique, and again, all credit to Kelley on this for really coming up with this concept, is looking at the different colors in nature and saying, okay, each one of these is going to be a different antioxidant type. And your body needs that, your dog's body, your body needs that rainbow of colors in order to, get a varied diet. So you have the red antioxidant, plants, you have the green antioxidant plants, you have the, on the blue spectrum. So one cool thing you do is rotate between those treats and be getting, different type. The other one too is salmon. And that's kind of a nice nod to the Pacific Northwest, but also, where everything is obviously produced. But the other thing about fish is it really functions like organ meat. It's going to be high in the same things like vitamin A, actual vitamin A, vitamin D, which most dogs are going to be D deficient. And, the B vitamins. And so like whole fish and especially fish like salmon, which has, a good amount of fat to it, is going to function like an organ anyway. And so I agree. I think they're highly palatable. And also for all you cat people out there, these are going to be, your cats are going to love these. We've been getting such good feedback.
It does say for dogs and cats. So we actually, just for space reasons, we house them in our dog area, but it doesn't mean that we've got a lot of cats shop both walls. We've got our cat treat wall specifically, but we have a lot of treats on our main treat wall that obviously work for cats as well. So that's great. So, we've talked a lot about all the different products, and I think we're helping everyone on this destination fresh foods. And sometimes it can be overwhelming because we learn so much. I mean, just what we've learned tonight and everything that you shared can be kind of overwhelming. So what are 3 simple things that people can do today that's going to make a difference tomorrow and the day after and for the future health of their animals?
Well, the first thing is be easy on yourself. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be all in. You don't have to jump in. You don't have to say like, well, if I'm not doing this, or should I be doing this? You don't have to jump on and learn how to feed a huge raw diet and make a beautiful bowl. And if you want to do that, great. But if you don't, just do something simple and feel good about it. I think that gets lost, and especially,
Right.
the world I'm kind of involved in, is just being like doing something very simple. So the first thing would be kind to yourself. The second thing would be do something very simple. And if it's not feeding something like Green Juju, which I think is very easy, it could be what you're doing. If you're, one of the things that, there was a study recently that validated that puppies that get, human food, table food, I don't really know what table food is. It's been on a table, so therefore dogs shouldn't have it. I don't understand that concept. Um, but even if it's just sharing those things, I mean, this is a practice that I engaged in, and I tell people to do all the time. I mean, even if you're feeding, the most highly constructed raw food diet, or you're feeding the best commercial raw that you can possibly find, it's still a great thing to do, right? And so when it comes to that, I would say that. And then the other thing is, something that I just enjoyed so much, and I think people should maybe get a little. I think it's just a perspective that we can enjoy our dogs more. Just enjoy that relationship. When you're feeding your dog and when you're giving your dog food, just enjoy the fact that that's why we came together. Why did wolves come to us? Because we could share food with them, and we developed this, cohesive relationship. And that's tens of thousands of years of this co-evolution that we've done together. So imagine how much it means to your dog when you give them a treat, or when you put the food bowl down. And that's something that I always enjoyed so much. And so I would say to people, be easy on yourself, do something simple, even if it's just sharing your own food, and just enjoy that. And I think that'll just give you a healthier relationship. And I think your dog will appreciate it more too.
I think that's really great holistic advice, because we're all humans, so we tend to overthink everything, and you're right, it's all in, but 1% change makes a difference. So, so that's what we're trying to change minds. Someone did have a question. Does Green Juju have pro and prebiotics?
Yeah.
And how does that help?
That's a great question. So one of the markers actually for, a good microbiome is a diversity of plants to provide prebiotics. So we want, obviously, all of those bacteria that you're introducing. So if you're using, and all these natural foods, obviously the one that's fermented is going to have probiotics as well. So we don't have a count on that, because you don't really need to, because of the fact that the only reason the pH keeps dropping is because good bacteria are growing. There's no other explanation for that, especially obviously over time. So you're going to get those probiotics, but also all, just regular plant foods are going to contain bacteria as well. So I'm sure that most people who are watching this, are doing some, for me, when it comes to pro and prebiotics, and I don't think I can, that point should not be understated, that it really does matter. A diversity of plants is going to help you have a better microbiome for those probiotics. So if you're using a probiotic, or you're using fermented foods, you're using this. And for me, that's how you build a successful diet. Isn't just, I do this for probiotics, I do this for fatty acids, I do this for this. It's how do we use natural foods that naturally contain all those things, in a multitude. So this would be a great way to add both pre and probiotics to whatever diet you're doing.
That's great. Well, good. Well, thank you so much, Billy, for taking the time. I know you should be packing probably instead of talking. So
There's a lot of work to be done tonight, but
yeah,
I appreciate the break.
absolutely. Well, good luck with the move, and we're really glad you're a part of Green Juju. We're looking forward to hearing about all the new things that you and Kelley are creating. It's exciting. I love a company that has so much thought into what they're doing with the sourcing and the production, and you don't have a lot of products, but the products you have are all stellar. So and they're just fun to introduce to customers, and our own dogs as well. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone for watching. We really appreciate you taking this opportunity to learn from Billy, and learn more about Green Juju, learn more about your animal's health, and let's just enjoy our pets. We love our animals, and that's why we're all here, and just be thankful that everything they bring to us. So thank you all. Have a great night. Thank you, Billy.
Excellent.
And
Thank you.
we'll talk to you all soon. Take care.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Bye-bye.